This is Meadowlands Online, an MMO focused on skilling inspired by RuneScape, Stardew Valley, and Hypixel Skyblock. I've just made a Steam page for the game, so if this sounds promising, you can wishlist it there, link in the description. Now in this devlog, I shipped a new update which you can play yourself at playmeadowlands.online. This includes a chat, emotes, and a newly reset Highscores. And as promised, I'll give a behind the scenes look into how the game is set up. First of all, I just want to say thank you for all the nice comments on the first devlog. We had over 450 people try out the game, and we hovered around 10 to 16 concurrent players, which is crazy to see when the only content is mining a rock. Now you're probably asking yourself, why would I deploy so early in development? And the answer is for practice. I learned a lot from this small launch. I had a couple of small bugs, but nothing server breaking, which was good. But my main takeaway was that I lacked admin tools. There was an instance where a player couldn't log in because the server thought they were still playing, and I didn't have a way to manually remove them without restarting the whole server. Rookie mistakes, but I'd rather make them now in a low stakes environment. Let's talk about specifics in the new update. As I outlined in the first devlog, I know all the mechanics I want to add, but I'm really taking my time in adding everything properly and not rushing. But as the game started to get more players, the lack of ways to interact inside of the game was stunting the community building. And in an MMO, even if you play solo, the most important part is the community. So I altered my roadmap to prioritize a chat and emotes. So you can now hold down left click and it will open a menu to emote. I have 8 emotes. We have a thumbs up, a wave, a smile, a laugh, a celebrate. This one is supposed to be like a come here. Then I have how many ore and your current ore count. For the chat, you just need to press enter, type out your message, and it will show up in the bottom right. I added this little speech bubble as well for whoever talks. Currently, I don't have any auto moderation, so I added some commands that you can use. So if we do /help, you can see that we have a /mute and /unmute for players. This is case insensitive, so you don't have to worry about capitals, and the player doesn't have to be online to mute as well. As for admin commands that only I can use, I added a /kick for the case from before and a /server mute. Even though this is a small playtest, I'm trying to build something wholesome, so if I see anything crazy, there's not going to be any warnings and an indefinite server mute. This will be until I add proper auto moderation and reports. Now the biggest gameplay change is to the mining. Rocks now deplete, and how I chose to do this would impact the whole direction of the game. My 2 options were to have them deplete for everyone, which is server side, or only for the players themselves, which is client side. And after a lot of thought, I chose client side. My vision is having players mine wherever they want, and I feel like having rocks deplete for everyone makes players avoid each other. I have thought about what old school RuneScape does with forestry, where they have a buff for having multiple players on the same tree. But as a solo player, I don't want there to be any pressure to go where everyone else is for better rates. The system I chose leaves all the decisions up to the player themselves, and they don't have to think about crashing another player or finding an empty world. This means I can make the world a lot smaller, and I don't have to have multiple clusters of nodes. I think this will lead to a higher density of players, which I really care about. Now in the last update, you could AFK for as long as you had the game open. I think this is one of the reasons why I had such a high concurrent players. But now you can only mine the rock for around 5 to 7 minutes. This time isn't based on a timer, but the amount of swings on the node. So when you swing on a node, it will add to a counter, and this counter is unique for node types. So rocks will have one that's different to logs. That means that changing between rocks won't reset your AFK time. Now for calculating if a rock goes on cooldown, I have a minimum swing and maximum swing threshold. So when you reach the minimum, you'll have a low chance to deplete the rock, and that will slowly grow until you reach the maximum or deplete the rock. On depletion, the swing timer will reset and the rock will go on cooldown for 10 minutes, even if you're offline. This will force players to move around a little while still keeping the game AFK. Also, I changed the chance to receive a rock from guaranteed to 50%. This will be expanded on in future updates. I also rehauled the mining system to be more general, and I'm calling these interactions. Now, when you interact with a node, on the node side, it will tell the player what type of tool to use. And other than visually changing it, I wanted to be able to adjust the timings. So I now have 3 variables for this. Interaction duration, which is how long the swing takes. Interaction time, so when does the actual hit take place? And interaction cooldown, that's how long a player has to wait before they can start their next swing. This will be influenced by tool stats, but I want to get a good feel between animations and timings. If I haven't mentioned this before, the player's visuals are temporary, so when I do make new ones, I really want them to match. The main inspiration for this is auto-attacking in League of Legends. There are some champions that just feel so good to attack and kite with, and I feel like I can replicate this in my game. That's all for the gameplay changes, but there's more to this update. The main thing I actually worked on was the website. The first thing I did was upgrade and polish the authentication process. This meant splitting it up into its own page and handling a lot of the edge cases. I'm using Firebase to handle a lot of this, but previously I didn't need the player to verify their email. This was because I wanted the least amount of barrier to entry just to try the game. But now that I have a chat, I was concerned that you could spam create accounts. So if you do use email and password as your sign-in method, you'll now have to verify it. I did a lot of polishing for the small things, like having it say Meadowlands Online instead of the project's ID, and having an actual email attached to the emails that I sent. For the people concerned about their private information, I just want to say that I'm not storing any sensitive data on my end. I receive an ID from Firebase when you create an account, and I'm using that as an identifier and none of your personal data. The next feature was the Highscores. This was something that I added quite early on in the last update, but it was just the top 10, which I'm pretty sure is why I had so many concurrent players. Now, the Highscores is expanded to everyone, and you can search up players by username. Honestly, this is nothing serious, because it will be reset in the future, but a bit of competition is always fun. Our next tab is the dev updates, and here I share more bite-sized progress updates with screenshots and videos. I also just ramble about my thoughts, decisions, and sometimes how I solve random bugs. This is all in the game's Discord server, so feel free to join, link in the description. Lastly, the landing page has been updated. I have a live player counter with some important links. I feel like the website is in a good place, and I'm mostly finished with the development around the game, so I can focus on the game itself. For this devlog, as promised, I'm going to give a behind the scenes look at the project, but this will be more external stuff. I'm going to save a full discussion of the gameplay and netcode logic for another video because I want to go deep into every decision and explain everything. The topics that I'll be covering in this video are the project setup, authentication and security, my dev environment, and how I deploy. Before I start, I just graduated my bachelor's, so I'm not an expert and still looking for an entry-level position. So if you have any feedback, ways I can do this better, or even opportunities, feel free to join the Discord and message me there. So for the project setup, I have 4 separate Git repositories. MMO Client is our GameMaker project, and I chose GameMaker because I have the most experience in it, and it's really good for 2D. It can also be used for multiple platform exports, so I can use the same project for desktop, mobile, and web. Another feature is that it has inbuilt support for WebSockets. Now I know for multiplayer games, it's best to use UDP for its speed, but for the type of game that I'm making, the WebSocket benefits outweigh the cons for me personally. I experimented in my other devlog series with Web Transport, which used the Quick protocol, and I made quite a lot of progress, but I felt like I was struggling with the lack of documentation, and I just wanted to make progress on the game instead of the tech. Also, WebSockets just work on every platform, which is great. So when I did take a step back and replanned, I chose the simplest way. Next, we have MMO Server, which is written in Rust and hosts our WebSocket server. In my previous attempt at an MMO, which was Allura, this was my first time using Rust. I went through the book and built both the client and server using it. Coming from using GameMaker language, which is very lax, I actually liked how strict Rust was, and how it caught a lot of bugs in the compiler. So I chose to stick with it for Meadowlands, but only for the server. Currently, the server hasn't crashed yet, so hopefully it will stay this robust. Our server is an authoritative one, so whatever game state it's in, that is the true one. For the gameplay logic, the tick rate is at 20, and for each room, it's being run on its own thread. For saving, the database that I'm using is MongoDB. I'm at such an early state in development that I don't know what my data will look like in the future, so I'm just using NoSQL for now. MMO website is where I handle the authentication, and also where I have an HTML export of the game. I went over the new changes before, but to reiterate, I'm using Firebase for accounts. When logging in on mobile and desktop, I have a link in-game that opens to the website where you can sign in and it redirects you back to the app. Our last repository is MMO API. This is for the player count and high score information. I tried several free solutions for this, but they were either really slow or didn't update fast enough. So I bit the bullet and paid for another server specifically for API requests. This does give me a bit of room to give more player stats in the future, but warning, I haven't optimized this at all. I'm basically caching the whole database every 10 seconds on the server, and then the website uses HTTP to request that information. Now, only the game servers and this specific API server is actually connected to the database. My API server also uses Cloudflare protection. Now let's talk about the authentication and security. This being an online game makes this one of my biggest priorities. I'm not sure how much I should be saying, but I'll give you a rundown of my setup. When you log into the game, the user is given a refresh token by Firebase. This refresh token can be used by Firebase to claim a login token that only lasts for an hour. To verify that you are who you say you are, you need a valid login token to connect to any game server. So when you connect to the server, your first message has to contain a valid login token and the correct client version. Otherwise, your connection will be disconnected or you'll just time out. There is another way to include the login token inside of the server link, so users won't be able to even establish a handshake unless they have something valid. But unfortunately, GameMaker doesn't support this, so I'm using the solution from above. For any inputs from the client that can be moving, interacting, or even chat messages, I'm validating everything. If a packet is not the expected size, I'll just instantly drop it. For the database, as I said before, I'm only using the ID that Firebase gives me as an identifier. The only IPs that can connect to the database are the game servers as well as the API server. For account creation, I'm forcing a certain level of password strength for email and password users, and also for those users, I'm now needing emails to be verified and using reCAPTCHA to deter any spam creations. Now let's look at my dev environment. I'm using VS Code and I have 3 Git branches for each repository. So I have main, which is the live version, dev, which is what I'm building new features on, and patch, which is the same version of main that I can use for small changes. In both the server and client, I have a designated dev mode, which I can sign to true. For the server, that means I can host it on my local host and connect to a local dev database. So to start the server, I just need to go into the folder and run cargo run. After a couple of seconds, it should be online. For the client, the dev mode makes it so that I can open 2 windows when I run the game. The way I have it set up is that it automatically logs me into 2 different accounts, so I can select the local server and connect on both. This was a recent change, but has sped up my testing by a lot. Now, I'll give you a look at what I do for my deployment. I'm trying to keep everything as low cost as possible, and hopefully I don't reveal anything too important. For the servers, I'm using Akamai's Linodes to host them. I have 3 regional game servers currently, one in Australia, the US, and EU, and I chose those because those are my YouTube analytics at the moment. My API server is on the west coast of the US, and for the database, it's also in the west coast, and I'm using the free tier of MongoDB Atlas. So to deploy on these servers, I'm using GitHub Actions and Docker. So whenever I push on MMO server to the main branch, it will automatically deploy on the servers. So in my GitHub, I've set up some environmental variables. So these are all global, but the server IP and ID are server specific. This makes it really easy for me to expand horizontally by adding more servers, or I could just pay more and upgrade the servers that I currently have. For the website, which is the only playable public version, I have to export as HTML inside of the MMO website static folder. Then all I have to do is push to main again, and it will automatically deploy using Cloudflare. For the client updates, all players need to do is just refresh. I'm pretty proud of the way I have things set up, and I think development will be quicker since I have a lot of the foundation done. One last thing, as a bit of a disclaimer and some transparency, I just wanted to say as a solo developer, I am using Claude Code to assist me with coding and debugging. For the art, everything is done by me. I have time lapses in my other series to support this, and I can guarantee that there will be no AI generated art in this project. Some people in the Discord have raised some concerns with security, and I hope the measures I've talked about are sufficient. Even though I do use these tools, a lot of the architecture has been refined from my other projects that have been in the works for years. This architecture isn't the most optimal, but I'm making sure that I respect my future self by taking things slow, planning properly, and understanding every addition. I've definitely put hundreds of hours into this project, and honestly, someone could vibe code everything I've done in a fraction of the time, but I believe in my taste, my decision making, and the lessons I've learned through many scrapped iterations. So, what now? I've just reset the Highscores as I upload this video, and other than any small bug fixes, the deployed version will stay the same for a long time. And that's because I'm going to go full steam on the actual game. I'll be documenting the progress in the Discord. I'm not sure when the next devlog will be, but I want to get as much progress done as I can. If this game is something you would play, then wishlist it on Steam and try it out yourself at playmeadowlands.online. Thank you so much for watching.